So in this section, Israel adopts Manasseh and Ephraim. Here's the verse in Genesis 48. It says, he's talking to Joseph. He says, Joseph has come in. Joseph has heard that they said, your father's ill, he's getting old, he's not going to make it much longer. And so he comes to visit him, but he really can't see. Okay? And so he comes in, and so he realizes Joseph is there, and he starts talking to him. He says, your two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, who were born to you in the land of Egypt before I even got here, they're mine. Just like Reuben and Simeon, they shall be mine. Okay? And your offspring, which you father, the children that you have after these, they're going to be yours. These two are mine. They are full brothers. Okay? They get a full inheritance just like if they were my son. So he adopts them. This is what adoption looked like in the ancient world. Not quite so easy today. Like, they're mine. Okay. It's like works, you know. But it said the one after that, they're going to be brothers to their other brothers and sisters. They're not part of this. Okay, so what's interesting here is Jacob as Israel fully adopts Joseph's two half-Egyptian sons as his own son, and promises them the inheritance just like one of his own regular sons. This is critical. If you hear people talking about DNA, and I got to get my DNA tested. Israel just adopted two half-Egyptians and made them his own, along with the tribes and the inheritance and everything. You know, and even in Ezekiel 47, it specifically calls out these tribes as part of the inheritance when Greater Israel is being established. And so this is really critical as to who it is. Then an interesting thing happens. It says, and Israel saw the sons of Joseph. They got a little closer. Something happened there after he says that. So he basically has adopted them. And he said, who are these? And Joseph says, they're my sons whom God has given me here. He's, oh, okay, they're the ones I just adopted, right? Well, bring them here and I will bless them. Okay, now here's the interesting thing. This is where we get caught up about the arms being crossed and the younger for the older. That's okay, but what's interesting here, that you know, the younger coming before the elders, not really anything new. If we just think about it, because that's been happening ever since Abraham, right? So we see that over and over. What's interesting here, what is new, is that Israel just expanded outside of DNA bloodlines. Okay, and he will do it again. Israel will do it again when the mixed multitude joins them coming out of pagan Egypt to serve the living Elohim. So we see this pattern developing of what Israel is going to look like in the future. Okay, so that's when they come out of Egypt. So and this is interesting too. It starts out there in verse 15. It says, and he blessed Joseph. Who does he have his hands on? He has his hands on Ephraim and Manasseh. Right, so he has his hands, both hands, on the sons, and he says, and he blessed Joseph. So what happened here, over and over, Scripture will refer from this point on to Ephraim and Manasseh very often as Joseph. But it's actually talking about Ephraim and Manasseh, okay? Since they are his two offspring that are adopted, and they inherited his inheritance. And ultimately, Jacob gives him a double portion to take care of that. And so that single place they get the double portion. Again, that's mentioned in prophecy multiple times as well. He says, and he blessed Joseph, saying, the God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, and the God who has fed me all the days of my life to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from evil, bless the lads, and let my name be on them, and let the name of my father Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude upon the earth. Okay, so it's a powerful blessing, right? And so he blessed them that day, saying this. He said, by you Israel will pronounce blessings, saying, God make you as Ephraim and Manasseh. Now what's interesting about what he's saying there is they are going to be so blessed that Israel will see them, and as we bless our children and bless others, was like, may you be like Ephraim and Manasseh. And Israel does that. Israel uses that. We use that. And so, now what the Bible points out here is kind of a parenthetical statement that, and thus he put Ephraim before Manasseh, because Manasseh is the firstborn, and normally in Scripture they put the names in order of birth. So they're reversed here. And so when he blessed them, he put Ephraim, who gets the firstborn of that, even though Manasseh was actually the physical firstborn. And again, that's not new. That happens. And really what that's a picture of is who we would choose in our flesh versus who God chooses. We think we know who's going to be the one, but God's like, no, I'm picking the one. See, and that's what we see here. That's what's happening. Because the firstborn very often is like, in their flesh want to, I deserve this, I get this, I'm the, and pride gets all in the way. And God said, nope, little brother, he's getting it. Because his heart's in the right place. See, we look at the flesh, God looks at the heart, right? He goes on here to talk about, he says, and I give you one portion above your brothers. In other words, you can't just take Joseph's part and split it in half. That won't work because they're actually his sons now, these two, Ephraim and Manasseh. So he's like, I have another portion that I took from the Amorite. I'm going to add that here, and that way they will have an equal portion with all the rest of the physical sons. Does that make sense? So the bloodline, the blessing of Abraham has now gone outside the lines of DNA. Amen? Joseph gets upset and tries to change it. And he said, no, I know what I'm doing. He's going to be, Manasseh's going to be a great people, but truly the younger will be greater. And his seed, this is critical, his seed, his offspring shall become a multitude of nations, which is also translated in some translation, fullness of the Gentiles. Those words are completely interchangeable. So Ephraim here is prophesied by Israel himself to become a multitude of Gentiles or a multitude of nations or fullness of the Gentiles, which is some interesting language, okay? If you simply, for example, took his offspring and said they became many different nations, that really doesn't change this idea of the fullness of the Gentiles. And of course, you've heard that phrase. But because they're not full genetic Israelites, you can say they're the nations, because they were the nations from the get-go. They got adopted into Israel, but they were half Egyptian on that day. Okay? They're already half Egyptian, half Gentile. Okay? So this is a very special blessing on the descendants of Ephraim that go out into the world. So that the descendants of Ephraim, we know, go out into the world and basically completely disappear off the pages of the Bible. They completely disappear into the world. They're part of what we call the lost tribes. Okay? And so they disappear into the nations, which is where they actually do what they're called to do. Because there, under God's hidden hand that we can't see because we look in the physical, He's doing His work. God's doing His work. Did you happen to notice that some of the most odd Gentile nations were suddenly and are suddenly standing up for Israel? For example, when America decides to move the embassy, well, I shouldn't say decided. We decided to do that 20 years ago. Finally got a president who would actually move the embassy and do what Congress voted to do years and years ago. And the whole world's freaking out. No, don't do this. It's going to be good. And then all of a sudden you get these weird nations, just like that say, we want to move our embassy to Guatemala, Paraguay, Honduras, Romania, Brazil. Like, who are those guys? Where did they come from? I thought it was interesting when I wrote these down. It's like that Guatemala, Paraguay, and Honduras, those countries have pyramids in them. Yeah. Now, who's supposed to build the pyramids in Egypt besides Israeli slaves? I don't know. Just it was interesting. And then, of course, the melting pot of the nations itself. I mean, that's all America is America is just a big pot of the nations, from all the nations. And so, we're the biggest pot, I guess. We're the one that took the stand. So that's very interesting. So where is Ephraim in all this? I think he's right there doing what he's supposed to be doing until his time is full. Amen?